So we would get intelligence that a bad guy is at a location, and my unit in that first deployment as a reconnaissance unit, our job was to conduct raids on the objective site where the bad guy was. Go find him, and our missions were capture or kill missions. Capture him if we can, but if he tries to put up resistance, we put him down right there. And we would capture guys uh, and bring them back to the the firm base there. Mostly Al Assad is where we were stationed at the time, and they would enter this sort of I don't even know if judiciary process is the appropriate term. I guess we would have to call it that, although I thought it was farcical, to be honest with you, wherein we would have to prove that the guy that we picked up was a bad guy, and we'd have to have all this photographic imagery from the sensitive site exploitation showing that there was something bad he was doing. The burden of proof was on us that he was a bad guy, and there were certain ways that he had to be treated and could not be, certain things that could not be done to him. Um, he would spend 2 weeks going through an adjudication process, and if they couldn't put it together properly in terms of whatever legal process they were claiming to follow, the guy would be released. And by the way, while he was in our captivity for those 2 weeks, he earned US dollars. He earned like $6 a day or something like that, being held in captivity by us. And then he would get released if we didn't have enough documentation or whatever to show the burden of proof that the guy was bad. And I used to be just dumbfounded by this process, because I would go to our higher level commanders and say, why in the hell do you think we're going there in the first place? You guys have provided intelligence to us and said, we think this dude is bad. Go get him. I'm going to go get him. As a Marine, I am not interested in all of the law enforcement functions and all of the burden of proof and trials and all that other stuff. I'm sure that's relevant. I'm sure it's necessary in somebody's world. But then, we at the risk of our men's lives and our equipment and all the other things, we're going to go land on a guy's house at 3 o'clock in the morning, dynamically breach, blow his doors off, go in there and capture the guy at our risk and peril. Which, I got it, we're Marines, that's what we do. But you want to believe that even though it's what you do, you're doing it for a reason, a reasonable cause. And then we'd bring the guy back, and then they'd release him 2 weeks later. Hey, the burden of proof wasn't good enough. You didn't do a good enough sensitive site exploitation. We needed more. Who needed more? Some Iraqi judge. An Iraqi judge? Aren't we in this country fighting a war in Iraq? What is this Iraqi judge making decisions against us, the people who are there to help him in the first place? I don't even get that. Now, I'm not sitting here trying to suggest that if there was some legal process in place that we were there, we should be allowed to violate it. We didn't want to do that. But the whole nature of having such a strange process in place to conduct missions that we were being directed to conduct was just like it's really hard for me to kind of put it together when I'm there and I'm in stride doing it,
And what safeguards are in place to make sure this Iraqi judge is not being paid off?
That is exactly right. And the answer is none. And we witnessed time and again that these guys were being paid off. And that's why guys would get released. And then a name would pop up on our target list. And I'd say, man, I swear I recognize this name. I'm not great with names, but I recognize this one. Let me go back and check the files. Holy crap, we've already hit this guy once. We're going to go hit him again? We're going to take a platoon of United States Marine reconnaissance guys, and we're going to fly out in the pitch black to some unknown location in the middle of a desert where we are alone. We're not afraid, but we're certainly ready to fight if we have to. But to get the same guy again, where we risk the possibility that this time the Iraqis are ready, or the insurgents are ready in a better capacity, and we sustain damage or we sustain injury or death. And we would not just do that for a guy once or twice. There were names on the list that we went after more than 2 times. And it would be the same story over and over again. How did this guy get released? I don't know. There wasn't enough good enough data, whatever that was. So that's one example of being hamstrung.
Well, at this time, you're a major.
Yeah.
So one of the questions I want to ask you is, I mean, I'm assuming, the order comes down and you're given this mission, and then, you pass things on to the captain and the lieutenants. And then, we've got the senior enlisteds, and then we go down, to the E3s who are going to be doing most of the legwork, right?
Yeah.
And as you are, you know, looking at this and saying, this doesn't make sense at all, but you've been given an order, and then you've got to pass that order on to the officers and the senior enlisteds under you. How are you dealing with that as an officer, passing on orders that increasingly are hard to understand or even impossible to understand?
I can look at all of this in retrospect, and the answer to you would be it was terrible that I was passing along this stuff to the younger guys and forcing them to go out and do it. In the moment, however, how do I say this without it seeming like well, you're a hypocrite because you were supportive at the time. In the moment, I wasn't thinking this way.
Mm.
In the moment, I was thinking the worst case scenario. If I heard that I was going after a guy that I'd gone after before, I would be probably angry about it, but I wasn't dissecting it to the next level wherein I was thinking like, why is this system so broken? Instead, the answer would probably be like, man, I just hope this guy tries to pull a move on us and we can just bury this son of a gun and move on. Uh, we have rules. We follow the rules about lawful activity in war, and we didn't violate that. Um, and that's why you have to go pick these guys up again and again and again. When I went off to the war, I was still young and still naive, and I thought this is something that I wanted to do. I thought I needed to prove myself. I thought I needed to see if I could handle this. I wanted to be there with my fellow Marines, and there was, to some degree, a little bit of excitement about it. And then, as time goes on, you become sort of numb, and then you kind of get into this droning phase where you're just existing and you're doing it over and over and over again, and you've stopped caring about everything. Uh, but if the same mission came down, it was my job, because I knew there was no way around doing it, to make sure that my guys were motivated to go do it. And I should clarify for you, in this reconnaissance unit that I was, there is to a degree, a passing off of the mission, but I was the direct architect of all the missions. I designed the raids, and I would brief the raids, and then I would have the guys who were going to be clearing the house or whatever. They would get up and give their piece of it. And in many cases, I also was, after the first month or so, my commander allowed me to start going and running the missions too. So I would command and control some of the missions. I got to the point where I was actually out there. And so you're like, man, in your heart, you're passing along a mission here that is a redundant mission. We've done this before. But you're not viewing it you're viewing it that way in the moment, but you're not conflicted the way I am now about it. In the moment, it was just like, it's the next thing we have to do, just get it done. And if we're
Mhm.
lucky, the guy tries to shoot at us and we kill him and we're done with him forever. But otherwise, we bring him in and we go through this process again. I mean, that's your mandate. That's your order. You got to do what you're told to do. Do we get frustrated about it and talk about it, as we're planning it? Of course, we did. But at the end of the day, I also had the responsibility as a Marine officer to uphold the orders that were given to me. And if the commander said go, then all right, sir. Now, behind closed doors, did the commander and I get into many a heated discussion? And me using foul mouth language and MF and the whole thing? Absolutely did. To the point where my commander probably was very challenged by me, and probably would just get fed up hearing about it. He knew it in his core too. But we're going to do what we were supposed to do as Marines, first and foremost, unless it's a completely unlawful order, which we
Right.
never had any of those given to us. But otherwise, if it meets the constraints of a lawful order, you're going to execute, and you're going to do your part to be a team player. And at that point, with my perspective, I wasn't viewing it the same way I do now. At that point, I was like, it's just the next thing. Let's go get it done. and stay motivated, boys. We got 10 months left. We got 8 months left. We're down to 5 months.
This is just kind of a practical logistical question. You said that that at a point your commander allowed you to be involved in command and control. And I'm just interested in where are you as a major? So I'm assuming that when these guys go into the house at 3 in the morning, you've got E3s and E4s probably on the tip of the spear, right? Kicking in the door
A
and
little more seasoned, than that in a recon unit. They're mostly 5s, 6s, and 7s.
oh, really? Okay. So you've
Yeah.
got kind of your middle managers there on the enlisted side. Where are you then as a major? Are you kind of back, just kind of keeping the big picture in mind, or what are you doing as a major during these operations?
Yeah, so it depended. There was, missions where I would be in a Huey helicopter in the overhead, 300 feet above the objective, listening to the activity going on the ground and controlling and commanding, what they're doing. So, for instance, I'd get a call while I'm in the overhead watching, and we used some technology that illuminated the objective in a way that was far beyond what most people are accustomed with night vision. Like it would turn everything into daylight, even though it's pitch black outside, right?
Oh,
So I can be in a circular pattern in a Huey helicopter floating around the top and looking out the side doors, watching my guys move with the technology that shows me where they are. And I'm watching what's taking place, and I have pretty good fidelity of what's going on. And then I would get the calls, hey, we've got squirters making their way to the river. Looks like they're going to try and, jump in some boats and get out of here. Do we have authority to pursue? Yes, you have authority to pursue. Cleared hot, go. Hey, we found these boats. These boats are wired. We know that they're using them for illegal, trafficking of weapons back and forth across the river in violation of, the many of the rules that we had in place. Are we authorized to sink the boats? Yeah, go ahead. Put a grenade in them and push them out into the water, and they'll be on the bottom in a second. Type stuff. I'm making those types of decisions. Should we let the dogs go? Yes, we had dogs that were designed to chase down squirters. We had dogs that were used for finding explosives, all that kind of stuff. And sometimes I'd get calls for that. So when you're up in the overhead at the finite level conducting the raid, like I'd get calls saying, "Hey, we've watched the enemy move to a house that was not originally part of the raid objective area. Are we cleared hot and authorized to pursue? And you got to make those decisions. And so when I'm in the overhead, I can do that. Other missions, I actually went in on the ground. My first mission where I was scared to death. I got this moment where psychologically I got overcome with fear of, what am I doing? Will I be able to do this? And that was a mission where I was actually on the ground, and I'm moving with one of the two units that's in the assault. And I've got my kind of command and control team with me, my radio operator. I had my ops chief and my air officer, kind of moving. And we're controlling all of those things that are not point blank shooting and fighting, right? So if we're going to need indirect fire support, that's, I'm controlling that. If we're going to need aviation support, I'm working with my air officer, and he's making the calls for that to have, either aviation using their their intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance capabilities to watch the objective for us and report. So you're doing all that kind of stuff, or maybe even dropping munitions if necessary. And then as we progressed through that deployment, we ended up owning a piece of battle space, which is not normal for a reconnaissance unit. Recon Marines go in, they conduct their mission, and then they extract because they're small and they operate in limited size teams with limited logistics. And there's a whole discussion we could have about that. But for whatever reason, the powers that be determined that they wanted to utilize us to own a particular chunk of ground on the earth in Iraq, and to be responsible for a large type or a large series of activities that would not normally be within our purview. That included anything and everything from localized patrolling, checkpoint operations, all the way up to council meetings with the elders, counterinsurgency, key leader engagement type stuff. And in those activities, I'd be out on the street. I laugh because I remember a particular day where I had my logistics officer with me, and we had to go out to do something. And for whatever reason, The Marines who were working a checkpoint, stopping cars and searching them, were pulled off to go do something else. And I was like, don't worry about it, stud, I'll take care of it. And here I am, the operations officer for the unit. And I'm standing out there with my logistics officer, who's a fellow major. And we're stopping cars on the road as they're driving through this area. And we're getting the people out and we're opening up all the doors and spot checking these cars. And we're laughing at each other. Like, what are we doing out here? We run this command. What are we doing spot checking cars? But it was what was necessary at the time because
At that time.
that's just the non-linear nature of what you're doing. Things just happen, and you're like, "Wow, this is what I'm doing today."
Wow.
So yeah, I was all over it, depending on the type of mission
Yeah.
and the time that we were doing it. I could be on the ground, or I could be in the overhead, or I could be back in the rear sometimes, just watching it all on the screens. It varied from mission to mission.
I'm always interested in hearing officers talk about the burden that comes with being an officer. As a lieutenant, you've got your responsibilities. You get up to major, you got, there's a lot of stuff. I have no idea what it's like being an 04, but there's a lot of stuff you have to pay attention to that the E3s and E4s don't. And I've got in my mind an image of you up in a helo, and you're watching these Marines, and you said in these cases there were going to be more E5s, E6s, E7s, but still these enlisted Marines down there, and you're in command. As an officer, I'm interested in hearing officers talk about the sense of responsibility that comes along with being the one in charge, being the one in command. I mean, you can bring to your mind's eye right now those Marines. They're in the house. They're in getting ready to go in. They're doing some mission, and you can see them. As the commander on the scene, what is your kind of psychological relationship with those guys?
So this is a tough question, and you probably saw and read parts where I talk about the complete and utter desensitization to all of the mission and the mechanical nature that takes over. I reference when in the city of Hit, we had some Marines struck by an IED, and my first response wasn't who was it or whatever else. My first response is, all right, get another team ready. It's a mechanical nature. It's a response without feeling. It's a response that is oriented on accomplish the mission, and you don't really allow yourself into the psychological or emotional piece of it during the mission. It became mechanical. It became systematic and process driven, and I did not. I disconnect from the emotion of what I may or may not know of the Marines during the course of the mission. Instead, it is a systematic process of, are you meeting the objectives, and are you clearing properly, and are you getting through and getting the bad guy and getting out of there? I think to a degree some of that is necessary. The It's not a real word, but the autotron nature of, like, the robotic nature of, I'm not thinking about that. I'm thinking about accomplishing the mission and kill the enemy. Um, as time goes on, when you have Marines wounded or hurt, and you have a moment to breathe, I think that's when some of the feeling floods in. But in a consistent, sustained environment like Iraq, I think you have to do what you can to bury that to a degree, because you cannot afford to get mired down in that, or else you will become ineffective. And I realize that that sounds horrible, and I struggle. I have struggled with that, but it is a reality. The little girl with the Santa hat is actually the subject of one of the only two recurring nightmares I have. Fortunately, I haven't had them in a while, but for a long period of time, I had a nightmare that that little girl was showcased in. Um, a completely innocent little girl. We were out on patrol, and I just thought it was ironic when I saw her, because she was a little Muslim girl, of roughly 3 years of age, wearing this bright pink jacket and a Santa Claus hat. And it was near Christmas time when we were on the patrol. And it just, she caught my attention. And I was like, I wonder if she even realizes the nature of that hat and how it's, completely not consistent with her religious beliefs and the way she's being raised.
Mm.
Ironically, or maybe ironically is not the right word, but interestingly, she is the subject of this nightmare that I have when I come back. I had this period of time that lasted probably about 10 years that I was having this recurring dream that that little girl, is manning a machine gun, and she's got me pinned down behind a car. And in my mind, I know I'm going to die. And she is just sitting there, rapid fire, hammering, and the rounds are just splintering all around me in the dream. And like I can see her face and I can see the hat, but she's like a larger version of herself. And she is just going to town on this machine gun. It's got me pinned down. And in the dream, it's like I feel my life is over. And that was a rough recurring dream that I had on a regular basis. It was the same dream over and over again.
How does it end? Just with you waking up or something?
The rounds are splintering all over me, and in my mind, I'm like, it's done. I'm dead, and I wake up.